Chinese fighter jet crosses the median line of Taiwan Strait, holds position for 14 minutes. Dares Taiwan to respond. America says nothing. 3 days later, Chinese warship enters waters 11 miles from Japanese territory. Holds position for 6 hours. Japan protests. America watches. 1 week later, Chinese Coast Guard rams Philippine vessel in disputed waters. Manila calls for help. Washington issues statement. Beijing is testing red lines systematically. Each provocation goes unanswered. Each silence invites the next escalation. This is how wars start, when nobody knows where the line actually is. The median line isn't theoretical. Since 1955, it marked the informal boundary in Taiwan Strait. Chinese aircraft stayed west. Taiwanese aircraft stayed east. Both sides violated occasionally, but never sustained presence across the line. That understanding collapsed on September 18, 2024. Chinese J-16 fighters crossed the median line and maintained combat air patrol for 14 continuous hours. Not a brief incursion, sustained operations. 8 aircraft rotated in pairs, maintaining constant presence. Taiwan scrambled F-16s. The fighters faced each other across visual range. Nobody fired, but the precedent shattered. China permanently erased a boundary that existed for 69 years. America's response? A State Department statement expressing concern. Beijing noticed the weak response. They learned the median line wasn't actually a red line. 2 weeks later, China tested Japanese resolve. Planned destroyer Type 052D sailed into waters 11 nautical miles from Yonaguni Island. This is Japan's westernmost territory, just 68 miles from Taiwan. The destroyer activated fire control radar. That's hostile act under international law. You only light up fire control when preparing to shoot. Japanese self-defense force ships shadowed the destroyer, but didn't force it out. The Chinese vessel remained for 6 hours, then departed at leisure. Beijing demonstrated it can operate in Japanese territorial approaches without consequence. Japan protested diplomatically. America issued supportive statement. No military action occurred. China gained another data point. Japanese red lines are negotiable under pressure. The South China Sea provides the clearest laboratory for testing limits. On October 3rd, Chinese Coast Guard vessels deliberately rammed Philippine supply boat near 2nd Thomas Shoal. The Philippine vessel was conducting routine resupply to Marines stationed on grounded ship BRP Sierra Madre. China blocked the resupply. Chinese ships used water cannons, then ramming. The Philippine boat sustained damage. Crew members were injured. This is use of force against allied nation. Treaty obligations theoretically require American response. The Mutual Defense Treaty commits America to defend Philippine forces under attack. Beijing knows this. They attacked anyway. America's response? Diplomatic support, intelligence sharing, no military intervention. China successfully tested whether American treaty commitments mean actual military action. Answer: apparently not. What's your take on these escalations? Type A, if you think America should respond militarily. Type B, if you think restraint is wise. Each test follows calculated pattern. China identifies potential red line. They probe gently with small-scale action. If America responds strongly, they back off temporarily. If America responds weakly or not at all, they escalate. Next provocation is larger, longer, more brazen. This is systematic testing of thresholds. It's how you map out opponents' true commitments versus their rhetorical positions. Beijing is discovering that American red lines are more like red suggestions. The Taiwan scenario provides the most dangerous testing ground. Chinese military aircraft now enter Taiwan's air defense identification zone daily. Not occasionally, daily. Some days see 40 sorties. Taiwan scrambles interceptors until fuel runs low. Then Chinese aircraft have free run. Taiwan cannot maintain 24/7 air defense, Economics don't allow it. China knows this. They're deliberately exhausting Taiwan's air force through operational tempo. Each day Taiwan cannot respond is a small victory for Beijing. Each day America watches without intervention is confirmation that Taiwan's defense depends entirely on Taiwan. The escalation is methodical. First, transport aircraft crossed ADIZ boundaries. Then fighter jets. Then bombers. Now entire strike packages simulate attack profiles. H-6K bombers, escorted by J-16 fighters, and supported by Y-9 electronic warfare aircraft, conduct practice runs that follow routes they would fly during actual Taiwan invasion. They practice in the open. Taiwan watches. America watches. Nobody stops them. The training becomes operational rehearsal, becomes accepted behavior, becomes new normal. Chinese actions around the Senkaku Islands test another red line. These uninhabited rocks are controlled by Japan but claimed by China. America committed to defending Japanese territorial integrity, including the Senkakus. This commitment got stated publicly by multiple administrations. Beijing is methodically testing whether that commitment is real or rhetorical. Chinese Coast Guard vessels enter territorial waters around the Senkakus approximately 4 times per month now. In 2020, it was twice per month. The frequency doubled. Nobody stopped the increase, so China normalized the presence. If you're enjoying this deep dive into modern warfare, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. The latest escalation occurred November 15th. Chinese Coast Guard vessel chased Japanese fishing boat in waters near Senkaku Islands. The chase lasted 2 hours. Japanese Coast Guard intervened. Chinese vessel didn't back down. It maintained pursuit despite Japanese presence. Eventually, the Japanese boat escaped. China demonstrated willingness to use force against Japanese civilians in disputed waters. This crosses threshold from diplomatic dispute to physical intimidation. America issued statement supporting Japan. No military assets deployed. China gained confirmation that American commitment has limits. Economic coercion provides another testing avenue. When Lithuania allowed Taiwan to open representative office under Taiwan's name rather than Chinese Taipei, Beijing unleashed economic retaliation. Chinese customs stopped processing Lithuanian goods. Chinese companies canceled contracts. Chinese state media encouraged consumer boycotts. Lithuania's economy suffered measurable damage. This is economic warfare against European Union member. EU threatened countermeasures, but took no concrete action. America offered diplomatic support, but no economic compensation. China learned that economic warfare against small countries works without triggering coordinated Western response. The same pattern applied to South Korea after THAAD missile defense deployment. China organized consumer boycotts of Korean products. Korean companies lost billions. Tourism collapsed. Eventually, South Korea agreed to limit additional THAAD deployments. Beijing achieved policy change through economic pressure. America did nothing to shield its ally from this coercion. The lesson: American security guarantees don't extend to economic sphere, even when economic pressure aims to change military posture. Australia faced similar treatment after calling for COVID-19 origin investigation. Chinese government imposed tariffs on Australian barley, wine, beef, coal, and timber. 12 different product categories faced restrictions simultaneously. Australia's economy absorbed billions in losses. America expressed support, but offered no market access to compensate. Australia eventually pivoted toward other trading partners, but the damage occurred. China again demonstrated that challenging Beijing comes with economic cost that America won't offset. Space domain testing is occurring with less publicity, but equal significance. Chinese satellites conduct close approaches to American satellites, not once, regularly. The satellites maneuver within meters of U.S. assets. They could be collecting signals intelligence. They could be testing kinetic kill capability. America tracks these maneuvers but takes no action. China maps out American satellite vulnerabilities without interference. When conflict comes, China will know exactly which satellites to target first and how to reach them. Don't miss what comes next. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an analysis like this. Cyber operations represent continuous testing below threshold of armed conflict. Chinese hackers penetrate American military networks regularly. They exfiltrate data. They map systems. They position access for future exploitation. Some operations get detected and expelled. Others remain hidden. American Cyber Command conducts counter-operations, but overall the cyber conflict favors China through volume and persistence. Beijing learned that cyber espionage below certain damage threshold generates American defensive response, but not offensive retaliation. That asymmetry allows sustained operations. The most brazen test occurred with the Chinese surveillance balloon. The balloon traversed continental United States in February 2023. It flew over sensitive military installations, including nuclear missile sites. It collected intelligence for 7 days before America finally shot it down. 7 days. China demonstrated ability to conduct aerial reconnaissance over American homeland, and America needed full week to respond. Beijing learned several things. American air defense doesn't automatically engage violators. Political considerations delay military action. American capability exists, but American will to act rapidly is questionable. After the balloon incident, Chinese officials claimed it was weather research. They demanded return of debris. They condemned the shootdown. This rhetorical jujitsu is part of the testing strategy. Act aggressive. When caught, claim innocence. Demand American restraint. If America accepts this framing, China gains freedom of action. If America rejects it, China still learned about American response patterns. Taiwan military facilities face continuous probing. Chinese intelligence services attempt penetration regularly. Some efforts use cyber means. Others involve human recruitment. Some succeed. Taiwan periodically announces arrests of Chinese spies, usually after damage already occurred. These operations test Taiwan's counterintelligence capability and map decision-making processes. China is learning which Taiwanese commands are compromised, which officials are corruptible, which systems are vulnerable. This intelligence enables planning for actual invasion by identifying weak points that exist before the first shot. What would you have done after the Chinese balloon flew over U.S. territory? Comment your answer below. Gray zone operations are deliberate testing strategy. Chinese military operates through Coast Guard and maritime militia rather than Navy. This provides plausible deniability. Coast Guard vessels aren't warships under international law. Ramming by Coast Guard is not act of war. At least that's the theory China exploits. They use force, but not military force. They achieve objectives without triggering formal conflict. America struggles to respond because the actions fall below traditional warfare threshold while still accomplishing coercive objectives. Chinese fishing fleets serve as maritime militia. Hundreds of vessels swarm disputed features. They're civilian boats manned by civilians. But they follow military coordination. They receive government subsidies. They report intelligence. They physically occupy contested spaces. Responding requires treating civilian vessels as military targets. That creates terrible optics. China successfully weaponized civilian assets, knowing America hesitates to use military force against ostensible civilians. The Whitsun Reef incident demonstrated this tactic perfectly. In March 2021, over 200 Chinese fishing vessels moored at Whitsun Reef in Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone. They remained for weeks, despite Philippine protests. The boats weren't fishing. They maintained formation. They stayed in place. This was occupation disguised as fishing. Philippines couldn't use force against fishing boats. America couldn't intervene on behalf of civilian vessels. China successfully occupied Philippine territory without firing a shot. Underwater domain sees similar testing. Chinese submarines probe near Guam regularly. They test American anti-submarine warfare capability. Most importantly, they normalize their presence in these waters. First time Chinese submarine appears near Guam, it's major incident. 10th time, it's routine. 50th time, it's expected. China is deliberately making their submarine presence routine, so that when war comes, their subs are already in position and nobody finds it unusual. This kind of detailed tactical breakdown takes hours to research. Subscribe to help us keep making them. Nuclear signaling represents highest stakes testing. China expanded nuclear arsenal from approximately 200 warheads to over 400 in last 3 years. Intelligence suggests 1,000 warheads by 2030. This is dramatic departure from minimal deterrence strategy China maintained for decades. The expansion tests whether America accepts Chinese nuclear parity or takes action to prevent it. So far, America accepts it. Arms control discussions make no progress. China builds without constraint. Another test passed, another boundary pushed, another. Chinese nuclear-capable bombers fly near American airspace regularly. H-6K bombers operate near Alaska. They approach within international law limits, but close enough that American interceptors scramble. Each flight tests American air defense response times. Each flight normalizes Chinese strategic bomber presence near North America. When real attack comes, these flight profiles will be familiar. That reduces warning time because routine flights suddenly become attack profiles without obvious distinction. The pattern across all domains is clear. China tests boundaries continuously, small violations followed by larger ones. Rhetorical red lines get probed until they collapse. Physical presence gets established incrementally until it becomes permanent. Each successful test emboldens next escalation. The process has momentum. Breaking this momentum requires demonstrating that further testing will trigger costly response. But demonstrating that requires actually responding, which risks escalation to conflict. This is the dilemma of deterrence. You must sometimes accept risk of war to prevent war. American credibility is the ultimate target of Chinese testing. Beijing isn't just trying to achieve tactical objectives in each incident, they're systematically undermining confidence in American commitments. If Taiwan sees America won't enforce the median line, why trust defense commitments? If Japan sees America won't respond to hostile radar lock, why believe in alliance? If Philippines watches as their boats get rammed, why rely on mutual defense treaty? Each American non-response makes allies question whether American support exists in crisis. Your engagement directly shapes what we cover next. Drop a comment and subscribe. This credibility erosion is strategic objective. China doesn't need to defeat America militarily if they can convince American allies that defense isn't coming. If Taiwan surrenders without fighting because they believe America won't intervene, China wins without war. If Japan makes territorial concessions to avoid conflict, America won't join. China wins without firing shot. If Southeast Asian nations accommodate Chinese demands rather than risk confrontation America won't support, China wins the region without invasion. The testing also serves domestic Chinese purposes. Each successful boundary push demonstrates Communist Party strength. It proves China is rising power that can challenge America. It justifies party rule by showing progress toward national rejuvenation. When China crosses median line and America does nothing, Chinese citizens see their country as strong and America as weak. This builds domestic support for even bolder actions. The testing creates momentum that becomes politically difficult to stop, even if leaders wanted to de-escalate. The question of how far China will go depends on where America actually draws lines. If every boundary is negotiable under pressure, then China will keep pushing until they find the real limit. That limit might be Taiwan invasion, it might be attack on American forces, it might be something else entirely. But finding that limit requires testing progressively until America finally responds forcefully. That process is inherently dangerous, because the line might be in a place that makes response require significant military action. Once significant military action starts, controlling escalation becomes extremely difficult. Some analysts argue America should respond more forcefully to early provocations. Meet balloon incursion with immediate shoot-down. Answer median line crossings with American aircraft crossing Chinese claimed boundaries. Respond to ramming with escorting Philippine vessels using American warships. The theory is that small responses to small provocations establish boundaries before situations escalate to crises. Better to risk minor confrontation early than major war later. Other analysts argue restraint prevents escalation. Each forceful American response gives China excuse for counter-escalation. If America shoots down balloon immediately, China feels obligated to respond. If America escorts Philippine vessels, Chinese ships must either back down or escalate. This creates escalation spiral where neither side can de-escalate without appearing weak. The theory is that strategic patience avoids traps that lead to unintended conflict. If you made it this far, you're the core of our community. Like, subscribe and hit that bell. The reality is both approaches carry risks. Responding firmly early risks immediate escalation. Showing restraint risks cumulative erosion of deterrence. There's no risk-free option. The question is, which risk is more acceptable? Immediate crisis that might be contained versus slow-motion collapse of regional order that eventually triggers war anyway. China's testing will continue regardless of American approach. Beijing committed to changing the regional order. That requires pushing boundaries until American-led system breaks down. The testing is systematic because the objective is fundamental. China isn't seeking minor adjustments to status quo. They want complete reordering where China sets rules and America accommodates or leaves. Achieving that requires discovering where America will actually fight versus where rhetoric exceeds commitment. Taiwan represents the ultimate test. China has declared Taiwan reunification is non-negotiable. America has suggested Taiwan defense is commitment. But the commitment remains ambiguous. China is testing whether that ambiguity reveals weakness or preserves flexibility. Each Taiwan-related provocation that goes unanswered suggests the commitment is weak. But ambiguity also means China cannot be certain American response to invasion would be absent. This uncertainty provides some deterrence, but eroding deterrence as tests accumulate without response. The trajectory is concerning. In 2020, median line crossings were rare. In 2024, they're daily. In 2020, Senkaku incursions were monthly. In 2024, they're weekly. In 2020, South China Sea confrontations were occasional. In 2024, they're routine. The trend is clear. Boundaries that existed 5 years ago have collapsed. Behaviors unthinkable then are normal now. Extrapolate forward 5 years. Where does this trend lead? The logical conclusion is conflict, because at some point, China crosses boundary that America actually will defend. Nobody knows where that boundary is because America hasn't defined it clearly. That's perhaps the most dangerous aspect. America maintains strategic ambiguity, thinking it provides flexibility. China interprets ambiguity as weakness. Allies interpret ambiguity as unreliability. Adversaries probe ambiguous commitments relentlessly until clarity emerges through force. History shows ambiguous red lines get tested until they become shooting wars. The process is predictable, even if the timing and specific trigger remain unknown. Chinese testing of American red lines is rational strategy for rising power, challenging established hegemon. It minimizes risk while maximizing information gain. It identifies where America will and won't respond. It undermines American credibility systematically. It creates momentum toward regional dominance. The strategy works because it exploits American desire to avoid war. That desire is understandable. War with China would be catastrophic. But desire to avoid war cannot override all other interests. At some point, avoiding war requires demonstrating willingness to fight. That's the paradox of deterrence. To prevent war, you must convince adversaries you'll fight it. China is testing whether that willingness exists or whether it's bluff that can be called. Each test makes the next test easier. Each non-response emboldens further escalation. The question isn't whether China will keep testing. The question is whether America will eventually respond with force, or whether the entire regional order collapses through accumulated erosion. We're watching that answer get written through actions, rather than words. Every day brings new test. Every test reveals whether red lines exist, or whether everything is negotiable if you push hard enough. Beijing believes they know the answer. They think American red lines are myths. They think America is declining power, more interested in avoiding war than defending interests. They might be right. Or they might be catastrophically wrong. Finding out which requires pushing until America either responds or doesn't. That's what we're witnessing. The systematic testing that determines whether the 21st century belongs to America or China. The answer emerges through confrontations that keep escalating until someone finally says no with force behind it.